Hey, Michael, welcome to the show.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's awesome. So, Michael, you've helped over 130 authors to hit bestseller list. That's incredible. How did you get started in publishing? Can you share that with us?
Great question. So I started in publishing a good 27 years ago. I actually a little backstory on me. I was a high school dropout and decided that I was going to be homeless, living with a young lady under a bridge, and I made money selling drugs and was pretty successful at it. But after a while, decided that I didn't need to be homeless. I didn't have I wasn't abused, wasn't coming from a bad home or anything. So I went home, got a job at a Burger King, was the manager at the Burger King, met a young lady. We got married. She said I was too smart to manage at Burger King. And so she had me go get a job at a company called Executive Excellence, which was selling a magazine called Executive Excellence, which was a division of the Covey Leadership Center at the time, as in Franklin Covey, or Stephen R. Covey, the author of
Yeah.
Some Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
And back then, it was just the Covey Leadership Center.
Mhm.
It hadn't merged yet with Franklin, and so it was just the Covey Leadership Center, and they were selling the magazine. And I came in and within 3 months became the number three salesperson within the organization, which is only significant because the then one, two, and four and five salespeople had all been there for more than 5 years, and they were just renewing old subscriptions that they had already generated. So I was going out and generating new revenue for the company. And at about that time, that's when the merger between Franklin Day Planner and the Covey Leadership Center happened, became Franklin Covey. And the magazine, Executive Excellence, was given to its executive editor, Ken Shelton, for being the ghostwriter for Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And at that point, Ken came to me and he said, "Hey, Mike, we publish all these great authors in our magazines. Why don't we start publishing their books?" And as a young, then naive, 18 and some year old, I'm like, sure, I can do that. And I failed miserably. But in that failure, I had to go out and learn how the book publishing industry worked. I had to learn how to do author and client acquisitions. I had to find a distributor to be able to distribute our books. I had to figure out production. I had to figure out all of these different elements in publishing. And though we failed, I impressed and the publisher's there. It's not a highly successful one, but and when I say failed, I mean we didn't have any, renowned or highly successful books. But what occurred was that I impressed some fairly important people in the industry and got a referral to work, a referral to a gentleman by the name of Ray Bard. Ray Bard was the publisher at Bard Press. Ray is a legendary business book publisher. He did some of the biggest books in business of all time. And Ray had just come off of a huge hit with with one of the books he published, Nuts, Southwest Airlines Crazy Recipe for Success. Sold millions and millions of copies, and he wanted to be able to help all of his authors become successful like that, become New York Times bestsellers. And so I was referred to him. He hired me to run marketing and PR. And the first day on the job, Ray said to me, "Michael, we publish business authors. What our authors want more than anything else in the world is to be a New York Times bestselling author." So with Ray's admonition in my ears, I set out to figure out how the different bestseller list works. And so I was then at that point 19 and some months. And what I did, funny enough, was I called John Wright at the New York Times and said, "Hey, my name is Michael Drew. I work for Bard Press. I was just wondering, could you tell me how your list works? We'd like to be able to put marketing behind our books to be able to have an opportunity to make New York Times." And John laughed and said, "Nah, not gonna tell you, but keep calling back. We'll stay friends." I called Jackie Blaze at USA Today, had the same conversation. She said the same thing. I called Bob Hughes at the Wall Street Journal, had the same conversation. He said the same thing. And I just stayed friends with those folks. And slowly they shared a little bit of information here and there. And then the first book I worked on for Ray Bard was a book titled Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads by Roy H. Williams. And Roy he owns the fourth largest ad agency in North America for buying radio. And he's today a living legend in marketing and advertising. He's built some of the biggest brands out in the world, diamond jewelers, cars, HVAC, and other such industries, plumbing and beyond. In any case, he'd written this book, Secret Formulas, and he was very well known in the world of radio, and all the radio stations were vying for his clients' money for their advertising budgets. And
Mhm.
so, what we did is I devised a plan to mail an advance copy of the book to the general manager of every radio station in North America. There were more than 6,000 of them throughout the US and Canada, with an offer that said, if you buy 20 copies of this book on a specific date from a local bookstore and then run 200 radio ads promoting the book, we're going to give you a copy of a training library for your sales reps. This is done by Roy. And you see, what will happen is these books, Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads, argue that radio is the best form of advertising for a smaller, medium retail business. So we'll give your sales reps this training. They'll go through the training. They'll take the book. They'll give it to potential clients. The book will close or convince the potential clients to buy radio. You'll have those sales reps trained on how to use the book to sell the radio, and you'll get more customers and more revenue out of that. And we had 867 stations participate in that offer. And we launched the book to number three on the New York Times and number one on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. That was the first of now 132 consecutive New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and Success Magazine bestsellers. And from that first campaign through all of the subsequent campaigns that I ran, I gathered more information from the list, but also seeing what worked and what didn't informed me for the next campaign and the next campaign and the next campaign on what to do and what not to do to be able to start meeting those standards. And so that's really how I got into it and started learning about how the bestseller list works. And then working for Ray Bard, I learned a lot more about the editorial side. I learned a lot more about the design of a book, to create the customer experience when reading a book. And also, I really learned how to work with the retailers in terms of both getting them sales but that they report, but also equally or more importantly, to work with the retailers in terms of getting our authors at Bard Press and then later other publishers they worked for and now privately through my company, getting my clients' books on retail shelves, what the rules and systems for that are, and how we can use the bestseller campaigns to be able to meet the needs of the retailers to be able to maximize the shelf space for those titles.
No, that's awesome, and thank you very much for sharing that background. But I want to ask you, obviously, you did not accomplish this record in one day. Looking back at your experience and where you started from, Michael, how has the publishing industry evolved since you began your career? The world has changed, obviously, right now. We live in the world of AI and technology driven world. So, what are some changes that you see in book
So
publishing?
I've been publishing now for 27 years. So a lot
Mhm.
has changed. I mean, a lot has changed in the last 5 years. But um, so before I got in the industry, when I was a young buck, we had this thing that happened in the world more broadly, but that had a massive impact on publishing and writing. And that was in 1980, the advent and popularization of the personal computer. Before that, writing was done by hand or on typewriter, and that required a lot of um, work by the individual to be able to get the ideas out and to edit and to move things around. It was not an easy thing to do, and so that dissuaded most people from writing. Unless you were really vested as a writer, most people didn't. Well, with the advent of the personal computer and word processing, WordPerfect to begin with, but then Word and others later on, pages on the Mac, that allowed for anybody to write because it's easy to uh,
Yeah.
write, type, copy, paste, cut. Grammar check, spell check, all of those things have been around since the early 80s. Obviously, they've improved over time, but
Mhm.
it opened up the world to allow anybody to write a book if they so chose. So pre 1980, between 1880 to 1980, the average number of books published each year was 40,000 new titles. The average bookstore carries on average 100,000 unique titles. Of those 100,000 titles, between 70 to 80% are what we call backlist titles, which are your perennials, your classics, and last year's bestsellers. And
Mhm.
so what that means is each year the retailers only have shelf space for 20 to 30,000 new titles. So the publishers that published between 1880 and 1980, they really, the books that they put out, that they controlled, they got the shelf space and for the most part, and they were able to sell at different levels, but they were able to sell, and the publishers had that control. When personal computer came out, everything changed. When I started back in 98, 99, there were 79,000 books published. So between 1980 and 1998, 1999, the number of books being published each year had doubled. Last year, there were 1,076,000 books published,
Ah.
right? All vying for the same shelf space. Like the amount of available shelf space has not increased with the number of books who have been published.
Mhm.
So the personal the computer was the first big change in publishing. And then the next would be the advent of the internet, but specifically Amazon. Right, Amazon was very young when I first started in the industry. They sold books. They weren't the giant that they are today. In fact, most people don't know this. Amazon, when they first came out, like 95, 96, they sold toys. They were a toy store. They were not a bookstore. By 98, 99, they had changed their focus to books, and they weren't selling anything but books for a number of years. Like their original focus for about a decade from there was primarily books before they started adding in other products that they could sell. And so with that, changed the distribution model a little bit for books, and then from there, the next big change dealt with ebooks. Now, the latest change has to do with printing of books.
Mhm.
Um, Historically, if you were self-publishing, you would have to print books, right? And you'd have to figure out the distribution. Ebooks didn't require printing, and so ebooks came out around 2007, 2008 with the Kindle and the things starting to advance from there. And so they slowly increased. Right now, they represent around 24.6% of books sold. There was a time where we all thought that ebooks would take over, and they haven't. They've stayed pretty static around just below 25% of sales and revenue. But that changed and allowed even more people to believe that they could publish, right? Now they could write it. Now they could put a book out through KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, and have that available on ebook so that it increase the number of authors. And then finally, the in the last 5 years, what's really blown it up is the print on demand, POD technology that allows people to be able to not just write their books digitally, but be able to use tools like KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, Ingram, Spark, Lulu, and other tools to not only publish ebooks, but to actually have print versions of their books available. And with that, more for whatever reason, the ability for the masses to use that print on demand tool actually enhanced the amount of folks that wanted to write books. So those are some of the really big changes that have happened in the industry. AI hasn't yet impacted publishing in terms of the amount of books being published or whatnot. I'm sure it's enhancing editing right now. It probably has some impact on research on books. The thing about AI is today, its current iteration of AI is that it's good at organizing ideas and content. So, like I said, from an editorial standpoint, it can look at details and give feedback on organization. It can say something's missing, or it can necessarily say something doesn't make sense. But what it can't do is generate experience, and this is especially true on the nonfiction side of book publishing. It does not generate experience. It doesn't have the sophistication or tool set to be able to imagine that kind of thing. And so the ideas still have to come from the author, from the business
Mhm.
owner, the impetus, and so it has to come from you. The tool of AI can help you organize it and get it out, but the ideas, the experiences still have to come from you. So it hasn't yet transformed the world of book publishing from a content creation standpoint. from a increasing the production, the number of books being produced, or we're not seeing any big AI exclusive books being written exclusively by AI. I'm certain over time that'll change, but the technology just isn't there yet.
Yes.
And so AI is there. We see its applicability as a tool, but we're not yet to a point where it's having a massive impact. But those other things that I mentioned are. And so then what you look at then is with more people producing more content, writing more books, you look at where a book's being sold. And most books, 80% of revenue, a publisher will tell you, comes from the stores, whether it's online or the brick and mortar stores. And in fact, what we know is that Amazon is the biggest retailer today, represents about 16.6% of all books sold. When you include all Amazon sales from print sales plus all online sales to that less than 25%, that means that roughly 75% of all books are still being sold through brick and mortar stores.
Wow.
And so what you're looking at then is the differentiation of the use of the content from a promotional standpoint, and how are you, if you're one of 1,076,000 and there's only availability for 20,000 new books, how are you standing out from the crowd to be able to be attractive to the retailers in order to secure that shelf space? Because again, anybody can get on Amazon, but it's very hard to get into Barnes and Noble and Books a Million and Hudson's and the Independents and other retailers. That has to be done by standing out and having the right kind of marketing in place that illustrate to the retailers that you as an author are going to be able to drive traffic into those retailer stores to be able to create the sell-through of your book off of those shelves.
Okay. And that was going to be my next question. How can a new author today, how can they stand out in this crowded field? I know you mentioned marketing. Are there other elements that
Well, so really that, I mean, that's what it boils down to is what, for nonfiction, especially what we call platform,
well,
right? So, and marketing is a component of that. So historically, there's a lot of definitions of platform, right? You've got technology platforms and social media platforms, and
yeah, yeah.
platform is used in a number of different ways. So let me define how I'm meaning it when I say platform. Historically, you would have a platform as a soapbox, and you would have missionaries, religious leaders, or politicians literally standing on a box so that they could be above the crowd, so that they could talk above the crowd. Because if they talked into the crowd, if you stand on the same level and you're talking into a crowd, your voice is going to be muted by the people in the first couple of rows, so the people behind you won't be able to hear you. So you
Mm,
stand on a platform, in that case, a soapbox, so that your voice could be heard above the crowd. It's why stages are designed in the way that they are, so that there's no rows of people in front of each other, so that your voice can be heard at every row within that theater, so that your voice is heard above the crowd. And
mhm,
so that is what a platform is. It's a soapbox, it's a stage. Only that today we have the ability to use the internet and other mediums to represent what that platform is.
okay.
And so what that means is that we're trying to be able to get our clients' voices heard above the crowd,
Mm,
right? And so what we look at then is really there are three parts of the platform. There's the traffic, there's the engagement, and there's the conversion. Now, one of the things that's important to note is that there's really no money in books, right? I have 132 New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today Success best-selling authors, and only about oh, it was seven of them that I'm familiar with have broken even or made money from book revenue against marketing expense. But what I can tell you is that 110 of those clients increase their gross revenue permanently by $1 million or more per year. I can also tell you that 10 of those clients permanently increase their gross revenue by $50 million or more per year. And I can tell you that seven of those clients permanently increase their gross revenue by $100 million or more from the proper use of the book in the building and the growth of their platform, right?
mm,
And so, no, most of them didn't make money directly from the sale of the book, but they mainly made money from the building and the growth of their platform. And so what we want to look at then is what is the platform? How are we finding and engaging an audience? So it's traffic. How are we generating the traffic? How are we engaging that audience? And then what are we converting them into? Right? In a relationship, it's the deepening of the relationship. So it's not sufficient to just talk to them. You need to be able to engage them and convert them into other forms of action other than conversation.
Okay, so it's been very, very detailed, and I appreciate you sharing all this depth of knowledge with us. I want to ask, what is your step-by-step process? Maybe for a new client intake, so that they can go from idea to bestseller. So, what does that process look like today?
Well, so the first thing that we do once we're hired, like there's a process of determining whether or not the client can actually has the platform and ability to work with us, because you
Mhm.
have to have a certain level of platform. But once it's done and we're hired, the first thing we do is we start with an uncovery. And so for the New York Times, there are five standards that we have to meet. We have to have 20,000 books on retail shelves. We need to pre-sell at least 20,000 copies of the book. In addition to the books on the shelf, we just pre-sell 20,000 books that'll go through the retailers for reporting. We need 10,000 ebook sales, a standard three. We need online media. We need to have 350 blogs, 90 podcasts, 90 vlogs, 50,000 consumer engagements in Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn each. And then for traditional media, the author needs to be seen in 100 markets in TV, 100 markets in radio, and 100 markets in print. So what we do is an uncovery where we sit down in person with the client for 2 days and we look at their existing platform and we look at how could we pre-sell 20,000 books? How can we pre-sell 10,000 ebooks? How do we meet the online media standards with your platform? How do we meet the traditional media standards? And if the author isn't able to meet all of them, we say, okay, cool. What vendor do we need to bring in to be able to fill in the holes that your platform isn't going to be able to meet and figure out the cost to be able to do that? And so the first thing is do the uncovery, figure out how to leverage the existing platform and meeting those standards. If they don't have a publisher, figuring out which publishing model, traditional or hybrid publishing, which model is best for them. Then figuring out which, based on which standards they can't meet, how we're going to meet those standards with vendors. Then going out and finding the right vendors to meet those, and including a publisher, and then executing and implementing. If the book still needs to be written, then that would be part of that overall process. To sell a book to a publisher, whether it's a hybrid publisher or a traditional publisher, I only need an outline and like one written chapter for the publisher to be sufficient, because what they're really looking at is the marketing. They're looking at the guarantee of the sales. They're looking at the all of the other things that we're doing and how we're going to generate it. That's what we have to demonstrate to the publisher, and so that's what the majority of a book proposal is, not the book itself, because the publisher might say, "Well, I don't like your book idea, but we want to work with you. So how about this book idea, and we'll do this book with you." And so we start with that uncovery to be able to do the planning for the content, do the planning for the publishing model, do the planning for meeting the marketing standards. And when, by the way, when meeting the marketing standards, we need to make sure that those are being met in a way that also meets the author their business objectives, right? Like it's not, you could throw money at meeting a standard necessarily, but if those standard meeting of the standards aren't done in a very linear and clear way, connected back to clearly stated business outcomes and measurements, then you won't see the impact on the business. We have to make sure that we're tying all of that together.
So good. So, finally, Michael, where can they find you so that they can connect with you and continue this journey with you?
So if your audience are interested in the bestseller services, promoteabook.com. I like to keep things simple. We promote books. So promoteabook.com, promoteabook.com is where we talk about our bestseller services. If your folks don't have the platform to run a bestseller campaign, or if they need to write a book, or if they're looking at building a platform so eventually they can become a bestseller, we do a book writing retreat in Guatemala 1 to 2 times per year. It's a month-long retreat. We have a website, bookretreat.com, bookretreat.com. Again, I like to keep things simple, bookretreat.com. And so we have that set up, and the promise is if you attend the retreat, at the end of the month, your book will be written, and we have a publisher lined up for you. And so it is some investment for those folks that aren't certain that they can take time away from running their business to do that. Note that great internet, great phone where we're at. The writing is you'll spend 4 or 5 hours a day writing. There's still plenty of time for you to run your business and do the other work that you need to while you're there. So, in fact, what I always observe for me when I'm there and I'm facilitating it is I get more work done in that 1 month than I do in about 3 months of work when I'm in my home office.
Yeah,
So,
that's good.
good opportunity. So, bookretreat.com for folks who need to write their book or need to build their platform or both.
Oh, that's good. Thank you very much, Michael, for coming on the show. We appreciate your time and the knowledge and experience that you've shared with our community. Uh, we'll continue to follow you. I'm passionate about books. I've written one myself, so it's not a best-selling book, but I'm thinking about the next one. So thank you.
No, my absolute pleasure. When you're ready for the next one, happy to sit down with you and talk through what that might look like.
All right. Thank you, man.
Thank you.